Hello and welcome back to Crafted by Corie. If you're new, I'm Corie. Welcome to my channel. If you're returning, thank you so much. I appreciate you more than I can say. And I am super excited. Today's video is a compilation of all of the Christmas and July projects for 2023. So if you missed out, they're all here in one place for you. Let's go ahead and get right on into the crafting.
DIY number one. Okay, I have this vase from the Dollar Tree and these napkins that I had picked up at the local grocery store last Christmas, actually. I cleaned out the vase because it's been sitting on my shelf. I just used some rubbing alcohol and a microfiber wipe or a scrap of it. And now I'm laying out my napkins, and I think these gnomes are super cute. I am going to peel away the second ply of the napkins and just get these ready to go, because when using what is that, Mod Podge, which is what I'm going to be using, you only want to use a single ply. So now I'm going to grab the gnomes that I want to use, or the part, excuse me, of the design that I want to use for this, and I'm using a water brush. It's also from the Dollar Tree, and it just holds water, and it's like a paintbrush. So I'm just brushing, and you can use a regular paintbrush with just water, but I outlined the area of the gnomes that I wanted to use so that it would make it easier to tear away. So as you can see there, it just really pulled right away from the area that I had marked off with the water, for lack of a better term. And then I went ahead and did the same thing with my other little guy. Now, normally I do this because when my little thing is rolling all over, when I Mod Podge, it helps to make the edges a little bit more subtle, right? And now I just showed you my Mod Podge. Now I had gone ahead and set one of these little guys in here, and I'm trying to go over the top of the napkin, so to speak, with the Mod Podge, and I was hoping it was going to be able to penetrate the napkin properly. And the reason I had opted to try to do this is to try to mitigate the amount of wrinkles that I was going to have. However, I found that it just was not going through the napkin the way that I needed it to get it to adhere properly to the glass. So I ended up kind of adding some, you can see it pulling up there. You want to be careful. So there you go. I added some Mod Podge underneath, and then swept it back down again. You just want to be real careful because the napkin will tear if you go over it too many times. I did have a couple of spots where I had some breakage of the napkin. I think I'd probably have to point them out for you to see them, but I know they're there and it bothers me. So I would just keep in mind you want to be gentle. Now I was starting to say that usually I use the paintbrush with water to help soften the edges. I don't normally cut my designs out because it makes a kind of a sharp line. So when using Mod Podge, I normally do it that way. That being said, for this particular project, if I had to do it over it again, if I had it to do over again, and you can see I put down the Mod Podge on the glass first, and then I put the second little guy in there. So you can see why I kind of learn as I go with this stuff, and hopefully you pick up some tricks and learn some things from what I'm doing as well. Excuse me. Okay, I'm like all over the place here, you guys. All right, so the edges. For this, if I had to do it over again, I probably would have cut it out with scissors. And the reason I'm saying that is because the background for these little guys was a soft gray color. It was not white. And so when I end up finishing this off in a little bit, and right now I'm just covering the entire inside with the Mod Podge just for consistency and just making sure all my edges are sealed. But I feel like had I cut them and made an actual sharp line around it, it might have actually looked better for this particular project. So I've got my Adirondack white chalk paint. I was showing you that the Mod Podge is completely dry right now, and I am just going to coat the entire inside of this with the white. Now you don't have to do that, but my little guys, especially their beards and things, were translucent. So I figured it would help to make them stand out a little bit more. Now, I also thought about putting a candle in this. And so if you're going to do a candle, you might not want to paint it white because I don't know that it'll actually glow the same way and shine through. I did not honestly attempt it with a candle at this point because I kind of figured that the paint was going to remove the possibility of that happening. I'll have to test that out. But you can see how at those edges, I don't know. My sister saw this and said she thought it was adorable. I look at it and I see all of the things that I would do differently. So I would love to get your thoughts on this piece and what you might have done differently. I mean, they're still super cute. They're gnomes. What can I say? But leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts on this piece. DIY number 2. Okay, this is a piece wood cut out from the Dollar Tree as well. And I have my ocean chalk paint and my Adirondack white chalk paint. I'm going to grab out a baby wipe, and that's what I'm going to be using to apply these. So using that blue, I'm going to go all the way across. I'm just sweeping it across the surface of the project. I'm not getting down into the sides or onto the sides. I mean, just by virtue of paint being what it is, there is some kind of seeping down onto the sides, but I'm trying to avoid getting globs, and I will be taking care of the sides and the back in a little bit. But I am working my way down about halfway across the piece, and then I'm going to grab another baby wipe, and I'm going to be using my Adirondack white on the bottom half. And I'm going to be creating an ombre effect here. Now, I did this technique that I pretty much just made it myself. If somebody else has done it, I'm sure other people have done it, but I've not seen it. I just kind of did it on my own. But I'm going to continue to sweep across and just kind of blend that as I go up. But someone recently, when I was using this technique on another project recently, was asking if they might be able to use makeup sponges. And I think you probably could if you don't have baby wipes in your stash. If you use makeup sponges and just get them wet and squeeze them out and then use the paint, I think that probably should work. If you have strong paper towels also that hold up to water, you might be able to use paper towel. I don't know that for certain. You might get fibers in there, so that might not be a great idea, but or if you have like a washcloth might work. If you have an old washcloth or an old rag that you don't mind getting paint on, that would actually probably work really well as well. But as you can see, I am just going over it back and forth with the different colors until I get the ombre effect that I'm looking for. And if I get a little bit too much paint somewhere, I just go back over it with the other. And I want to apologize if you are hearing background noise. I am actually on vacation somewhere and in a hotel room trying to do my voiceover. And so I have little control over the noise around me. So I'm so sorry if you can hear that in the background. But once it was all dry to the touch, I flipped it over and I decided I had been debating the white or the blue for the back and then the sides, and I ultimately decided on the blue. So I'm doing the sides, well, obviously the sides and the back. Now, because it was face down on the table like this, I thought the front might be sufficiently protected. Unfortunately, I did get a little bit of bleeding here and there, so I ended up going back in and having to touch it up, and I'll show you that in a minute. So just be aware that there is still the potential for bleeding. If I had to do it over again, I probably wouldn't have done it the edges while it was face down like that. I probably would have lifted it up and tried to just very gently do the inner edges. So I'm just folding this in case there's wet paint. I don't want to get wet paint on, any place that it might not be desired. So abundance of caution. And I'm using and now just a plain wet clean baby wipe to try to wipe away some of that paint that's on there before it completely dries. So that's basically what I'm doing here. There were a couple of spots where I felt like I needed to touch it up a little bit, so I did come back in with some white paint or with some of the blue as needed, but it was pretty good for the most part, and the clean baby wipe cleaned up most of it. So now I've got my little star that I've pulled out of my stash. This was part of a package from the Dollar Tree with a bunch of little wooden cutouts in all different shapes. I have my I want to say shiny. It's my gloss Mod Podge that I am applying to the star. And then I've got my gold glitter that I had shown you just a minute ago that I'm going to go ahead and pour over the star. So I'm just going to be real generous here so that it all sticks into the Mod Podge. Notice I am doing that on my parchment paper so that I can put the excess back into the container. So once I had it sit on the star for just a minute, I'm going to go ahead and pull my star out. I'm trying to be gentle with it because it is still wet. So I'm setting that aside, and I'm just going to go ahead and pour my glitter back into the container. Now you can certainly wait until it's dry. I was trying to keep working because I was trying to get my crafts done before I left on my vacation. So I'm still editing the video, but that's okay. I got the crafts done. So there is my star with hot glue. Let me know what you think. DIY number 3. Okay, this is a paper plate, or actually a set of paper plates that I picked up at my local grocery store. I got them at the same time as the napkins. They do match. So now I'm going to have like a little matching set of decor, but I'm going to grab out one of these plates and I am going to trim off the outer edge that I don't necessarily need for the project. So my goal is going to be to get this as flat as I possibly can. So in order to do that, I want to remove that part that's super curvy. I could have cut off more, but you can see my little gnome head, his hat at the top there is up on the curved part. So I'm trying to figure out how to lay this flat. It is kind of gathered is not the right word. You can tell that it was a flat piece that was run through a machine and made curved. So there are pleats, there you go. There are kind of pleats in it that I'm trying to get to lay flat. So I was using my hot heat gun, trying to massage it out, and it was working to some extent, and you probably could continue to do it that way and get it where you need it eventually, but I was starting to lose my patience, so I grabbed my easy press. Now you could also use an iron if you have an iron. You definitely want to use butcher paper or parchment paper, something to protect the surface and your iron or your easy press. But I went ahead and got that hooked up. I think I had it set to like 350 degrees. I honestly can't remember. It was whatever it was set at the last time I used it. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to see it on the video to see what it was actually set to. I believe it was 350, and I believe, oh, I almost saw it, but no. And I know it was set for 60 seconds because I thought, oh, I'll try that. And I ended up taking it off after about 30 seconds because I was starting to smell something like it might be singeing, and I did not want to burn it, right? So I picked that up, pulled it off. It did flatten it pretty well. And it's still hot, obviously, so I'm sticking it under my mat to try and cool it between the mat and my table because it wasn't going to do anything to my table. It wasn't that hot. But I got it sufficiently flat for what I was looking to do. So now I'm grabbing a piece of foam core board and I'm going to get it arranged on here in such a way that I'm going to be able to use it as backing. I'm just scoring the foam core board right now with my utility knife. I didn't go all the way through it. I'm finding that is a really easy way or easier way for me to get a shape that I want, by just scoring the top part of it and then going back through the foam, and then if I need to go back through a third time to hit the paper on the opposite side, that just works really well for me. So now I am laying it out on the foam core board. I've got my regular Mod Podge. This is just matte Mod Podge, and I'm going over the entire back surface of my plate and making sure I'm going over the edges. I'm being careful not to get Mod Podge on the front of this. And then once I have this completely coated all the way out to the edges, I'm going to go ahead and apply it down to the foam core board. So plop it right on there and get it lined up. And then I decided I really needed something heavy to put on this until it was dry, because otherwise it was going to potentially curl up and away from the backing, and I didn't want that to happen. So I've got this board, I think that's MDF, and then my Mod Podge giant container is pretty heavy, and then I ended up putting my Easy Press on it too. So once it was dry, I went ahead and peeled that parchment paper away. I've got my self-healing mat, and I grabbed my X-Acto knife, and here I'm just going to score it again, because that's going to give me the most amount of control. So I'm just scoring it right along the edge of the plate. I'm basically tracing the plate with the X-Acto knife, and once I got through that first layer, I could with control then go down through the foam layer and through the bottom paper layer to get this completely cut out. So just take your time. Remember that I speed my videos up by about 2.5 times so as not to completely bore you through all of the process. So I am going much slower than it appears I'm going. So just be careful with those sharp knives. All right, now I have some of my Kirkland ribbon. Don't know if you noticed, but it's basically the same pattern that was on the outer edge of the plate to begin with. That outer edge that we cut off was a red and black buffalo check, and this is a red and black buffalo check ribbon. And I am just kind of rolling the end of it to hide the frayed edge, not frayed, but the cut edge. So if it does fray, it will be hidden. And then I was kind of gathering it. I don't know if you could tell. This is a wired ribbon. So you can do this with regular ribbon as well. If I were to use regular ribbon, instead of just kinking it the way that I am, I'm just kind of forcing it to gather, essentially, by leveraging the ribbon or the wire that's in there. With non-wired ribbon, I would take a needle and thread or a sewing machine and just run a not too tight stitch, so a relatively loose stitch down the length of it, and then I would tie a knot in the one end of the threads and then pull the threads and gather the ribbon up on the thread, and that will create a gather for you just like this. So I am just going to continue to gather it up. You probably saw that I was applying it with hot glue. So gathering, 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 and then I'm going to lift it up and put down some hot glue and then just press it down into the hot glue. So just a cute little holiday country design. This would be super cute. Just about anywhere. I was going to say in a little girl's room. I don't know if a little girl would like this in her room, but I don't know. Oh my gosh. But I think it's cute. So I left a couple of extra inches on the end there so that I can roll it just again to hide that raw edge. That was the term I was looking for before, the raw edge. And then I will go ahead and adhere that as well. And this is pretty much done except for the little hanger that we'll do in just a moment, but just making sure that the ends are overlapping so that you can't really see the seam, and that everything is nice and lined up. Sealing that down, and voila, there we go. I think these are super cute, these little guys. So now I'm going to grab some red cord that I have in my stash. I can't remember if that was from the Dollar Tree or if it was from somewhere else, but I just took maybe a 3-inch piece. I decided to make a knot in it to have like a little loop. Not necessary. I don't know why I felt the need to put a knot in it. But at any rate, I am gluing down my loop. I was just making a mess of it. I should have let it just cool. I was trying to push it back down into the glue, and oh goodness, just applied some more glue, let it cool, and once it was cool, I cut off that little end, and this is it. DIY number 4. Okay, this is from a project I did, I don't remember when. It was one Christmas, or maybe a Christmas in July, but I decided I was going to do something else with it. So I had pulled off the beads and just set those aside. This is a scarf from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just trying to figure out how to wrap it around here. I'd seen something online that inspired me to do this. I'm not sure that mine was as successful as what I saw online, and I actually, in the process of editing this video, decided that there was a better way that I could have created this same type of piece, and so I might have to revisit this in another video and show you my idea to do this a different way. But I figured out how much of the scarf material I was going to need. I'm just going to go ahead and cut that down. And that tree piece, by the way, was just a styrofoam cone from the Dollar Tree as well that I had painted green. That's all that is, with a skewer stuck in the bottom of it. So I am going to go ahead and try and get this applied. At first, I was thinking Mod Podge. Okay, yeah. Now I thought I had glitter on this, so I've got my little my little ladybug vacuum cleaner. I was trying to suck up the glitter, and I realized that it's actually in the scarf. I just had the scarf inside out when I was first working with it. So anyway, I had been thinking about Mod Podge on this, and then I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to get it to apply the way I wanted it. So I ultimately ended up going with hot glue. Not sure that that was the best decision, because it does create, an interesting seam at the back. But you know what? It worked. And like I said, I could find a different way to do this project. Actually, not even with a styrofoam cone. So stay tuned, and hopefully I will show you my new idea for this look with the scarf, because I will make another one with a scarf when I get to back to my craft room, and can show you my other way of doing it. But in the meantime, I'm just continuing to apply the hot glue. I am not applying it all over the cone. I am only applying it along the back seam. So I continue to stretch it, make sure that it's nice and smooth across the front of my cone, and then I'm kind of tucking in pieces of the fabric. I'm cutting some of the fabric away where I have just too much excess. This is a very thin fabric. So here you see I'm cutting some of it away because I don't want it to look bulky and bulgy. Hopefully I'm making sense. So I'm trying to get it as smooth and as flat as I possibly can, while still ensuring that I'm covering up the entire piece. I don't want any of that green showing. So just taking my time. Ooh, got a little hot there. Taking my time, making sure that it's all folded in properly without making it look bulky, and gluing it down as I go. So once I got it all completely covered, I am finishing it off by tucking in that raw edge. And I'm going to try and seal it down. Well, not try, I did seal it down with the hot glue with that edge tucked under. And that also helped to camouflage that there was hot glue being used, because it didn't seep all the way through the second layer of the scarf. When I was applying just the single layer, as I was starting the project, you could see the hot glue seeping up through, and it wasn't real pretty. So I was happy to see that when I had it folded over, it was grabbing enough of the fabric. It was going through enough in the fabric to grab it and secure it, but it wasn't showing through that second layer of fabric with it being folded over like that. So that was great. So now I've got that all sealed in. I always use my knife because it's cool and I don't know. But now I'm looking for that hole that I originally had with that skewer. I'm putting the same skewer back in there. It was a little bit longer than what I wanted, so you'll see me shortening that in a minute. But right now I'm grabbing that gem that was on the original piece. I wanted to see if that was going to work for this. Here I'm going to go ahead and try and shorten it by pressing it further down into the tree. I could only get it so far, so then I ended up trimming it actually with my scissors. So you will see that in just a moment. But first, I've got these little stars. I decided that gem was just too small for the size tree that I was working with for this particular style. Trimmed off the little piece of the skewer. I'm going to use that to attach my star. I'm cutting the base of the skewer at, I'm kind of sharpening it like you would a pencil if you were to use a pair of scissors to sharpen a pencil. Yeah, I know. Yeah. But it wasn't quite sharp enough to go through, so I'm grabbing a skewer out of my stash that still has the pointy end on it, and used that to pierce it, and now I'm good to go. So now I need a base for my little tree. And what I ended up doing is grabbing some of that foam core board that was left over, and I'm just going to use my scissors for this. Now, I don't normally cut foam core board with scissors because when you're working with a larger piece of it, it actually will damage the foam core board, so I don't recommend using scissors on foam core. But for this and what I was looking to do here, it was perfectly fine with these little pieces. So I've got 3 of them that I've cut to the same size and shape, and I'm just going to sandwich them with hot glue. I am not putting hot glue in the middle of these little pieces. I'm keeping it to the outer edges because I want to be able to put my skewer through the middle of this. And if I put hot glue in the middle of it, it will block the skewer. The skewer will not be strong enough to go through the hot glue. Okay, so you want to just keep that in mind if you do it this way. There is a method to my madness most days, but I'm going to go ahead and stick it down into the little base, and now it's going to be able to hold my tree up. And once I have that all nice and secure, I'm going to grab my black chalk paint and I'm going to paint the base black. So I'm also going to be painting the little skewer tree trunk, so to speak. But before I do that, I'll pull it a little ways out of the tree so that I can paint it without getting paint on the fabric. And then I can just slide it right back in again when I'm done painting it, right? There was something in my paint. I don't know what it was. Might have been a piece of hot glue or dried paint or something, but that was why I was kind of smashing my brush on the table. But I'm just going to completely cover this with the black, as you see. And here I'm pulling that skewer out so I can catch the little trunk, and then I'll be able to slide it back in again in just a minute. So, and that way my fabric is protected and I can have my trunk completely coated in paint. So there, slide it right back down. Okay, and now I have some Dollar Tree ribbon, and it just is red with some snowflakes on it, and so I thought it was a really good match for the fabric that I had used for my tree. Using a little bit of hot glue, applying my ribbon, and I'm just going to wrap this around the base. So this is going to kind of camouflage the sides of the foam core board that I have sandwiched together and make it a little bit more cohesive. It doesn't look bad without it. I mean, if you don't look too close, it could look like little pieces of wood stacked together. Maybe it gives it a little bit more charm. Maybe you distress it with white paint. But for me, I opted to just wrap it with this ribbon for a nice finished look. So once I get it all wrapped around, I'll trim it off a little bit long because I will tuck my edge in. So I'm going to fold that end over, and I'm going to put a little dab of hot glue there to secure the fold or the crease, whatever you want to call that. And then I'll apply it down and secure it for a finished piece. And that is it for this one. You'll have to let me know what you think. And like I said, stay tuned for my other idea of how to do this project in a future video. DIY number 5. For this project, I have a Dollar Tree planter, and this is a napkin that I had used last week for another project. I'm going to be using some more, actually the rest of it. This is some backing from some shelf liner that I'm using in lieu of parchment paper, just because I figured why waste it. And I am going to just clean this pot up a little bit. I had used it in another project like last year or the year before, and I kind of took that apart and decided I wanted something new. So here we go. I've got my Adirondack white chalk paint, and I'm going to be giving this one good coat all over, if I can get the chalk paint open. But like I said, just going to give that one good coat of chalk paint. I'm not sure why I'm showing you so much of the leading up to the painting part, but I realized I really am going to be able to need, oh my goodness, I'm going to need to be able to move this to let it dry so that I can continue to craft while this is drying. So I grabbed that board. It's just something I have in my stash for a future project, and I put my project on top of it, moved it over to let it dry. Now I am using my scissors. Because I had used this last week, I had already removed the second ply, and I talked about the fact that I was wishing that I had actually cut it out rather than tearing it. I'll leave a link to last week's video in case you want to see what I was talking about, but essentially I'm cutting super close to these little guys. I'm leaving a little bit of an outline so that they have a bit of definition with what I'm doing. But I cut out all these little guys. I ended up going to the other napkin remnant that I had used last week as well to grab one more little gnome guy and cutting around all of that as well. And then I actually did cut out some of the little Christmas trees that were on there and snowflakes. And now I was showing you my Mod Podge, and I'm going to go ahead and start applying everything to my planter. I'm going to start with the Christmas trees because I figured they could be in the background, and then my intent, and it actually did end up working this way, was to kind of overlap a little bit with the gnomes. So it's like the gnomes are in front of the trees. But I applied that first one, and then I'm going to go to the opposite side so that I am trying to space these out as evenly as possible. And I'll just keep working my way around. I have 4 trees, so I'll do one on either side, and then I'll split the difference and put a couple in the middle there. And then I'll go ahead and apply my gnomes. So you might have noticed that I'm applying some of the Mod Podge first, and then putting the gnome down and applying the Mod Podge over top of the gnome again. And I apologize for the squeaking in the background. We clearly need to put some WD-40 on one of our doors. So, oh goodness. But I just continued to work around the entire planter until it was covered with the trees and the gnomes. And now I'm coming in with those little snowflakes and just placing them randomly. I am now wishing that I had painted the entire inside of the pot, which is something I normally do, but I figured I wasn't going to be able to see that far down, so I just kind of left it. Anyway, the next day, this is how it looks when it's all dry. I had one little spot that I had messed up with the napkin. It got all bunched up and it was ripping, and at any rate, that'll be the back. And now I am grabbing some of these poinsettia picks. It's actually one large pick of poinsettias that I'm kind of manipulating to put down inside the pot. But you can put any kind of arrangement in your planter that you want.
And you can use any kind of little Christmas napkins for this too. So I've just got some old grocery bags that I'm tucking down inside of this to help with getting it all situated. I could have used floral foam, but I didn't really think it was necessary. And I just felt like I'd be wasting a lot of floral foam. But let me know what you think of this one.
DIY number 6.
All right, I have these little ribbons from the Dollar Tree and a whole bunch of pine cones that I've had in my stash for quite some time. I had gotten them for free from somebody who had a whole bunch of them in their yard. This was going back probably, goodness, 5 years ago. So that's how long I've had them. So they've had plenty of time to dry out. But I am taking my little 3/4 inch or 1/2 inch ribbon. I'm not sure. I think it's only 1/2 inch, but tying a whole bunch of little bows with my ribbon. I have 9 pine cones that I'm working with, so I'm going to do 9 little bows. And then in just a moment, I completely ran out of space on my camera card and didn't realize it, so I lost a whole bunch of footage. But actually, that wasn't quite just yet. It'll be right towards the end of tying off all these little bows. So right here is basically where that happened. And so you didn't get to see what I did with all these loops. So you can see I've got this other Kirkland ribbon. This is something I pick up from Costco every year. It's awesome. They have beautiful ribbon, but I created loops and I made them all different lengths. So I have ribbons and the loops, I've got the loops going from 12 inches, I would guess 12, 14, 16, 18. Yeah. I mean, I offset them by about 2 inches a piece, and then I glued the ends to the top of each pine cone and applied the little bow on top of that. I just used hot glue for this. And so now I'm going to align the tops of all of my loops and bring them all together. So we're just going to speed things up here a little bit, getting them all together, kind of alternating well, not really alternating, but they're all going to be different lengths, right? So they're all going to hang differently. So I'm kind of trying to mix up the lengths so I don't have them all just going up in order, but a little bit more random. Hopefully that makes sense. So I've got them all gathered at the top. I'm sorry, I'm a little out of frame here, but I'm just trying to figure out how I want to have them lay and where I want to gather them together. And I was trying to decide, how I was going to attach them. And ultimately I decided I was going to just make a little knot here with a separate piece of ribbon that I will have serve as tails. And my thought is I'm going to use those loops up at the top to create a false or a faux bow. Now, I love this idea still. However, I should have tied this off a little higher up because my loops are way too big. So I really need to kind of cut the size of these loops in half. And you can't really see it there because clearly I'm out of frame, but trust me when I say they were just a little too big. I thought about sliding that knot up, and then I just decided I was going to cut my little loops in half. Not literally cut them, but as you can see, I'm kind of poking in the middle of each loop. And then I started twisting them off because remember, this is wire ribbon, so you can manipulate it a little bit better than, well, a lot better than with regular ribbon. So I'm just kind of creating this false set of loops by twisting the little bow sections at the middle. Hopefully, I feel like I'm not explaining myself very well right now, but hopefully the picture speaks 1,000 words and you are kind of understanding a little bit better what I'm trying to say. But let me know what you think of this one.
DIY number 7. Okay, this is, I think that used to be a candle, or I'm not sure where I got it. It could have come from the Dollar Tree, but I think it was an old candle from an old candle. I have my olive oil, I have a thing of water there. I've got a bunch of little Christmas doodads that I am going to attempt to use. I had a feeling some of these were going to float in water, and so I wasn't really sure what was going to work. I've got these red glass beads that I knew would clearly sink to the bottom, but I was trying to go with things that were a little bit heavier in hopes that they would sink and not float. So I am going to cut down some of this little evergreen and just try and make sure that it's going to fit in there. I want to make sure that everything is going to remain at least an inch below the top of the vase. That is my goal. I'm probably more like an inch and a half because I want to make sure that it's not going to interfere with what I'm doing at the top of the vase. Now, this is something that I had seen online a few months ago. My goodness, excuse me, I can't stop yawning. I'm always recording this late at night because it's really the only time I have to do my voiceovers, so forgive me. But I'd seen this online a few months ago, and I thought it was such a neat idea. Essentially, we are going to be creating an oil candle. So I've got my little decorations in here, and you can put anything that you want in there as long as it won't float. But I'm filling this up with water. I ran out of water in there, so I had to go get more. I'm leaving about an inch, only filling it so that it comes to about an inch from the top. And now I'm going to start pulling things out that are floating because they're floating big time and sticking up above the water. Yeah. In hindsight, I probably could have left them because we're going to have kind of a barrier that you'll see in a minute. But this is a Dollar Tree candle. It came, I think they were 4 or 5 to a box. They're like emergency candles. And I literally just bent it in half. It was weird because normally candles, in my experience, snap. This one was bending. It was strange, but I was able to break the candle in the middle, and then I just literally pulled the wick out of it. So if you have wicks, you can use them, without having to destroy a candle to get to them. But I then tied a knot in it about an inch from one end. Now I am struggling with this plastic container because I want the base out of there. I finally realized the best way to do it was getting my piercing tool. So I'm poking a bunch of little holes along the edge, kind of all in a row. And that gave me a place where I could stick my scissors in there and cut that out. Just be real careful when you're doing this because you don't want to end up cutting yourself by accident. I was doing things that were not real safe that I didn't include on the camera, but just be careful. So now I'm just trimming down that base, and it ended up being all for naught because I decided to stick it in there and make sure that it was going to float, and it sank immediately. So I was like, oh no. And then, of course, it disrupted everything that had not yet been floating and caused other things to float. So goodness, the struggle is real sometimes, I promise. So I ended up pulling a few other pieces out. And then I went back to my little plastic bottle to see if I could salvage this by using a different piece of it. So the sides of this are a little thinner. So this does end up floating for me. I'll show you in just a second. But it is curved, so I had to kind of work with it and curve it in the opposite direction. And here I'm showing you that it actually is going to float, drying it off. But you just want to make sure you get it as flat as possible. So I placed it on my scissors because I'm trying to poke a hole right in the middle of it. Just making sure my hole is big enough that I can put my wick through it. Now I started putting it up from the bottom and then realized I want to have it drop down from the top. So I want my knot at the top. That's going to keep the wick from falling down into the jar, leaving the tail in the water. And now it's time for my olive oil. So I'm just going to pour my olive oil right over that plastic barrier. And that's why I was saying that I could probably have left some things that were going to float up to the top because that they wouldn't have passed that. Now, just for fun, I decided to put some green glitter in the top. My olive oil had a bit of a greenish tinge, but it was really more yellow. So I decided, let's put some green glitter in there. If I had to do it again, would I do it again? I don't know. It's fine, but it does look a little weird to me. So anyway, I went ahead and lit it up, and y'all, I was able to let this burn while I continued to craft for a couple of hours, and it hadn't even made a dent in the olive oil from what I could tell. So I think this would burn for a good long time, and I'm really excited about how it looks. But take a look at the final reveal picture here and let me know what you think of this one.
DIY number 8.
All right, this is a scarf that I used in the last video as well to make this little tree. And I talked about how I wasn't really thrilled with it, and I had another idea for how to make it. So I've got some actually it's not cardstock. Cardstock might have been a little bit easier, I was thinking. So keep that in mind. This is, oh my goodness. I keep wanting to say cardboard. You all know, poster board. There we go. I got it. So first I am using a piece of parchment paper. I'm going to make myself a little pattern. I was struggling with this a little bit. I recommend if you're going to make a pattern for this, just use a piece of computer paper. It'll be easier to manipulate. The parchment paper was just too slick and it didn't want to, it was just giving me a hard time. But I'm basically making a cone, and I cut the bottom off, and now I'm cutting it right up the middle because I just need one full section of this to create my cone shape. At first I was confused. I was like, oh, did I do it wrong? Do I need 2 of these? And then I realized, nope, I just need the one. And that is my template for my little Christmas tree that I'm gonna make. Now I realized that I wanted to have a little bit more of an edge on it for putting it together, because otherwise my cone was going to be smaller because, you know, of the way that it was cut. I needed an overlap. Hopefully that makes sense. So I just made that one edge a little bit wider, and then I drew the arc, cut it out, and then I'll have my little piece to create my tree with. Now, this is why I was saying that cardstock would probably be easier. It definitely would be easier. It would 100% be easier. The poster board did not want to work. I got it to work. It just took some effort. And I did end up cutting the little point off the top too, if you can see there, so that it wasn't in the way when putting my little piece together. So now I've got my scarf, and I'm trying to figure out how much of it I need. I'm going to just cut off the piece that is going to cover my poster board. And you know what, guys, this ended up being a hot mess. It really was. What I had envisioned in my head, I don't know. I think I probably should have just I should have wrapped the scarf around it and just hot glued it to the inside so that you couldn't see any glue. It would have been covered, but no, I decided to use the Mod Podge, thinking, oh, you know, using Mod Podge and Mod Podge it down. Yeah, because as I started doing this, I was like, oh my goodness, I can't let it dry flat because it'll get crispy. Do you know what I mean? It'll get firm and solid, and then I won't be able to manipulate it. It'll be like stiff as a board, and I won't be able to create my cone shape. I have to create the cone shape while it's wet. My goodness. So anyway, I'm just stretching the scarf over the fabric and just making sure that it is where it needs to be. And now I'm just going to slather this puppy with all kinds of Mod Podge. I had it all over my hands, y'all. I mean, it's going through the fabric. You can probably see it in some places. So at this point, I was just all in. I'm like, okay, here we go. So I'm trying to recreate my cone shape with the Mod Podge on the fabric. Ironically, this actually turned out really good, but it was a mess getting there, and it definitely took some effort. I was a little frustrated with it, but yeah. So again, if I had to do it again, I probably would have done as I just described before. I would have used hot glue to wrap the fabric around and glue it on the what would be the inside, and then create my cone without all this Mod Podge. Maybe I'll have to try, maybe third time is the charm. Maybe I'll have to try it one more time in next week's video. I don't know. Let me know if you want me to try one more time with this other idea that I'm telling you about, because now I'm using the hot glue too. I got Mod Podge everywhere. Now I got hot glue, you know, sealing the seam. My goodness. But leave me a comment and let me know if you want me to try the third way that I just described, or if I should just stop beating a dead horse. So now I am going to just Mod Podge this to death. Yeah, I'm trying to seal it down on the inside for the part that is being wrapped around underneath. And then I'm going to give the entire thing a coat of Mod Podge just to make sure that the fabric is all sealed. Make sure it's all uniform, because clearly there was Mod Podge coming through some of it earlier. So I just wanted it to all look the same. And here it is once it was dry the next day. And as you can see, it actually turned out really well, and it's stiff. So I was very glad that I did not let it dry before putting it into the cone shape. But now I've got this little wood round from the Dollar Tree. I'm planning on using it as a base. And I think it's from the Dollar Tree. I said that, but I'm honestly not 100% sure because it's been in my stash for a while. But just going to give it a good sanding because it had a bunch of rough edges on it. And then I painted it with my Crimson chalk paint by Waverly. And once it was dry, I was just making sure that the bottom was dry there too. I am ready to attach it. Now, I was literally going to glue it right on there, but my glue gun had turned off, and so it was having to heat up again, and it wasn't ready, which kind of made me start thinking about other things that I could do. So I ended up grabbing from the Dollar Tree these little ball things. I forget what they're called, and my image as I'm doing this is too small for me to read it on the computer, but they're these little decorative vase filler things. I don't know how else to describe it. And then I also grabbed a dowel, and I'm thinking that the little ball can serve as my trunk, my little decorative trunk. So I'm cutting the dowel, and as I was cutting it to the length that I thought I needed, I was like, you know what, that looks like it might be half. Can you believe it was exactly half? But anyway, I don't know, things like that make me happy. So I am just testing that this is going to be the right length and that's going to fall where I want it. And then I just kind of shoved that up into my little tree until it was solid. I'm gluing down the little ball. I'm just spinning it around to make sure that it is centered. And then I dropped that dowel right down through the little ball. I'm putting some more hot glue in there to secure the dowel, and then I'm just going to hold it until it is nice and cool. All right, so now I have these foam snowflake stickers. They are white with glitter on them. The glitter is kind of iridescent. And I'm just going to make a little star for the top. So I've got 2 of these. I'm just peeling all of the paper away from the backing, and I'm going to be applying it to the tippy top of my little tree. And just peeling away the other one. I'm going to stick that one together with the other one so that all the stickiness is not hidden, but, well, it is hidden, but enclosed within the little star. And that's really it for this one. So let me know what you think.
DIY number 9.
Okay, this is from the Dollar Tree. It's just a little sign, and I am going to be cutting off the top part of it. Now, it is too wide for my little miter box, that my hand saw miter box. So I am going to be using a, I want to call this a Sharpie, my X-Acto knife. my sharp knife. So as you can see, I'm using my square for my straight edge, and I'm just going to keep scoring this over and over again. These boards are not real thick. It's somewhere between a wood and a really heavy cardboard, I would say. I'm not even sure what it's called, but if you are patient and you just continue to score it over and over again, you will be able to cut through it. You just need to apply a little bit of pressure and just keep scoring it until you make it all the way through. This is if you don't have access to a saw. Obviously, if you have just a saw, it's really, really quick if you have a saw. But that's an option for you if you don't have one. So now I've got my piece that I'm ready to work with, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do this. My goal is to put 24 equally spaced holes across the bottom. So I broke out my measuring tape, and then I started using my calculator on my phone, trying to figure out. So I'm like, well, it's just shy of 18 inches divided by 24. And I was like, well, that's not quite right because, yeah, you guys, I am visual, right? I can do basic math, but this one was really challenging me. I stuck with it for a little while and finally decided that no, I need a visual. So I pulled out some parchment paper and I decided I was going to make myself a template because I want this to look nice. I want it to be properly done. I just don't always know the means to get there. So if you have a good way to figure out how to put 24 of these little holes, across, how you calculate that, I am all ears. So at first I started creating this template. This is just parchment paper, but I did it longer than the board. And then after doing all my folds and everything else, I realized it needs to be the same size as the board. So I created a new template that was going to be the same length as my board, so that as I create my folds, which I'll explain in a minute, it was going to be within the confines of the board itself. Hopefully I am making sense. So now I started folding it. I folded it in half, and then I started folding it in quarters. I probably, if I'd thought about it, should have done my folds in a different way, because then I realized, well, the halfway mark, because I have 24 holes I'm making, the halfway mark is going to be right smack in the middle of my, what would it be, 12th and 13th holes, right? Originally, I was thinking each crease would be the center of a hole. Well, no, that's not how this is going to work out. Each hole is going to have to be between the creases. I don't know if I'm making any sense whatsoever, but stick with me because I do finally manage to get it there. I'm just sharing all of this with you so you can see what I was doing, what wasn't working, how I was figuring this out. And again, if you have any suggestions on how I could have done this in an easier way, I am completely open to suggestions. So here I'm just counting up the number of sections that I have, and I had 24 sections. So I realized I was going to have to punch my holes in between my creases. Now I also want to make sure that they are in a straight line. So I decided I was going to go ahead and, actually I guess maybe not yet. I'm not sure what I was doing at this point. Maybe this is where I was thinking about punching my holes. And this is where I realized that I needed some sort of a line to keep everything even and straight. So this is where I'm going to fold up the bottom, and I'm going to fold it up about 1 inch. And I want to make sure that it's even all the way across because I want my line to be straight. So I am just making sure that I've got my crease going all the way across, 1 inch up, nice and straight, and it's along that crease line that I'm going to be punching my holes for my template, or at least marking it off. So I'm using my little piercing tool from the Dollar Tree, and I had it folded in half because I figured I could do, a couple of them at a time. It was getting a little bit off, so I ended up, flipping it over and going through the other side as well, and just making sure that everything was centered along that line in between my other creases. Hopefully I'm making sense. And I know you probably can't see those little holes that I've pierced, but I was able to see it on my work surface. So these were really just guidelines, because again, this is just a pattern really. And I'm going to be getting out my drill in a few minutes, and where I marked those little, I'm going to call them guide holes, that's where I'm going to be drilling. So, and you know what? I am so proud of how this piece turned out. So I hope that you're going to hang in there with me. This is a little bit more involved than some of the things that I normally do. I wouldn't say that it's difficult per se, just more involved, and it took me a little bit more time than a lot of the projects I work on. And after this one, I've got a couple of really easy ones. So just hang in there with me. So now I have a candy cane, and I have all my drill bits, and I'm looking for a drill bit that is slightly larger than my candy cane. I don't want it to be super large, but just it's going to be enough so I can fit my candy cane into the hole. Now I have this up on some pieces of wood. I don't think I showed that, but I want to make sure I'm not going to drill a hole through my table. I did kind of nick my self-healing mat there because I didn't have it quite propped up high enough, but I went and got some more wood and set that underneath the left side. I am probably not doing this in a way that is the safest, so please be safe. Don't necessarily do what I do. I probably should have had this not anchored down. What's the word I want? I don't know. Probably should have been doing it off the side of a table so that, yeah, just be safe when you do this. That's all I can say. I am doing it the way that I need to be able to show you what I'm doing with the camera. So now you can see I've got all of my 24 holes punched here. It did chew up the board a little bit. So I'm just taking my sand block and sanding that down. I was afraid it was going to completely take the finish off of the surface, and surprisingly it did not. There I was just testing to make sure that my candy cane fit through the hole, because that would have been a real bummer if it didn't. And now I'm just taking some fine grit sandpaper and going in around each of the little holes as well. So while it got a little bit chewed up around the edges, it wasn't too bad. And once I get everything cleaned up, I'm going to actually grab some Adirondack white chalk paint, and I'm going to dry brush this just to kind of clean up the hole areas, and then also brighten it up a little bit, and just make sure that the piece looks coherent. Coherent, is that the right word? Uniform, maybe? I don't know. But I definitely wanted to touch up the area around those holes. So that was the purpose of the dry brushing on this. So once I had that all set, I went over to my Cricut app on my phone, and I am just typing up Christmas countdown, and I picked out just a basic cursive font. And then I went ahead and did a whole bunch of numbers 1 through 24, and got those all set. I put them originally in the same font. Y'all, I ended up doing these numbers 3 times, and I'll explain why in a minute. But I've got my little Cricut Joy with the Smart vinyl. It's just measuring off the vinyl. I'm telling it to go ahead and start cutting, and it went to work. I love this little machine. It does such a great job, and it's just so quick and easy to use, and it tucks away in my little drawer, and it's awesome. So I cut off the vinyl, then I was cutting out some of the excess vinyl that I wasn't going to need to use, because I'd like to save the scraps for future projects. Then I went ahead and I weeded the numbers first. I wanted to make sure that I applied the numbers to the project first, so that I would then be able to figure out where to put the Christmas countdown as far as from top to bottom goes. So weeded all of that out. And once I had this completely weeded and put it up here, I realized my numbers were going to be too large. They were not going to fit properly, especially when I got into the 20s over my holes. So that was why I redid it. The first time, I basically just made them a lot smaller. And while that was cutting, I went ahead and weeded out my Christmas countdown, got that prepped. I always find this so satisfying. I know some people don't have the patience for it. I know Annie from Indie Annie Jones is always saying she just doesn't have the patience for it, but I actually find weeding relatively satisfying until it becomes like this. So the font that I'd used, because I made it so small now, I was struggling massively with trying to get this weeded. These, especially the ones in my numbers, they did not want to cooperate. I finally got so fed up with it. I was like, heck with it. I'm going to do it again. But I needed a different font. I needed something that could remain smallish. I mean, not super small. They were probably half an inch tall, I'd guess. But I needed maybe not even half an inch. They might have been a little smaller than that. But I needed something that was going to be chunky enough for me to be able to weed, right? So here comes the third time. Third time's the charm, right? So once that was all set, I went ahead and I weeded it, got it all ready to go, and then I was ready for my transfer tape. So just using my little weeding tool also to help me make sure that I'm poking all the numbers out and that they're laying down. Now, I opted to actually use the vinyl. I also could have used these as a stencil to paint everything onto the board. But like I said, I decided I was just going to use the vinyl letters. I don't know why I wasn't using the transfer tape at first, but there I've got my one on, and I'm just going to go ahead and do the same thing all the way along the length of my board and just apply my numbers in order right above the little holes that I've drilled. So I had originally in that first attempt thought, well, maybe I could get the numbers where I needed them and just put them all down at once. Yeah, I think that would have taken a lot more calculation because I wasn't really sure what the spacing needed to be for each number in the Cricut app. And yeah, so I was trying to keep it simple. Now I've got my Christmas countdown that is all on my transfer tape. I'm going to burnish that down and then peel that back. And again, I could have used it as a stencil and painted this on. I decided I was just going to use the vinyl itself. And now I'm going to embellish the top of it. So I have these greenery picks, not greenery, evergreen. That's what I wanted to say. These evergreen picks. At first I thought they were going to be too long. So I went ahead and I cut one of them in half. Oh, excuse me. And then I've got my little berries there. And as I was working with this, I realized that with these larger berries, the evergreen definitely needed to be longer. So like I said, I am visual. I have to see things laid out before I 100% commit to them. But I finally got it going to a place that I liked it. And that was when I decided I was good to start going ahead and securing this down. So once I have it somewhat laid out the way that I want it and where I can start kind of seeing it in my mind's eye now, I'm going to go ahead and use some hot glue to pin this down. Not pin it down, but secure it and glue it down. Clearly I fuss a lot when I'm doing these things. Okay, Corie. Enough's enough. Let's go. All right. So here I am going to go ahead and apply some hot glue. Just a nice bit of hot glue there. Putting these down. I did twist these together just to try to keep them a little bit conjoined. You don't necessarily have to do it that way, but that was how I opted to do it. And now I'm going to tuck in my berries, but I decided that the picks were a little bit too long, so I trimmed that down because I don't want wires sticking out. I want everything nice and pretty and hidden. So I got the other one prepped, got that set down. And then I do have some little gold pine cones, these little mini pine cones that I'm going to be applying to the middle in a second to cover up that center section. But first I grabbed the other two pieces that I had trimmed, and I tucked those in. There was some hot glue in there that kind of grabbed them, but I'm going to be flipping this upside down once I have everything attached and just reinforce it in the back. You'll see that in a minute. So I've got these 3 little pine cones that I'm setting down. I think 2 of them were actually painted gold, and then one of them was like gold glitter. So just something to give it a little bit of bling and to add a little bit more gold, like my lettering. So here I'm just coming in and reinforcing the back of it for those 2 little pieces of evergreen that weren't 100% glued down. And just making sure that those are nice and secure. So now I have this cord. I believe this is from Hobby Lobby, if I'm not mistaken. I think I got it like 50% off or something. And I am going to secure it to either side. This is a gold cord that's also a little bit iridescent. It has like greens and reds kind of glimmering through it. It's really very pretty. But just creating a hanger for this, I had added some hot glue, as you saw, but then I'm also going to grab a little piece of scrap fabric, and I'm going to cut a little rectangle here that I'm going to put down over the hot glue. I've seen other people do this, and I just figured it would help secure it a little bit better. I don't know if that actually works or not, but it also is hiding the end of my cord as well. So kind of just cleaning up the back and making it a little bit neater, a little bit more finished, and it blends somewhat with the board itself because it's white on white. And while the board is a little bit distressed, hopefully you guys forgive me for letting this be what is in my mind finished. So once I have that all taken care of, I decided my hanger was a little bit too long, so I'm just going to tie a little knot at the top of this. I kind of twisted it a few times to help make it easier to knot, and that is actually going to create the center of my hanger and give it a little bit more interest even. So as far as I was concerned, it was a happy accident. And that is it. Now I get to put my candy canes in, and I have my little Christmas countdown advent calendar, if you'd like to call it. But just got those all in, and this is all set. I love this so much. I hope that you do too, but let me know what you think of this one.
DIY number 10.
All right, this one is going to be a lot easier, but super cute, and it will be great as a little centerpiece, especially if you have a couple of little LED candles to put around it. But I have a scrap piece of burlap. I have half of a styrofoam ball. You could also use floral foam, but I liked the idea of the ball. And a bunch of glass beads to put in the bottom just to weight it down and help it have a solid surface, but also, like I said, weighted down so it's not going to fall over. This is some wired jute cord. There we go. Wired jute cord. You could also just use regular jute cord or twine. That was originally what I was going to do, and then I decided to use this. I thought it might help make it a little easier to work with. In a minute, you'll see what I'm talking about. I'm just adding some hot glue to the ends, and then I used a piece of parchment paper to just kind of mold it around the end so that it wasn't like a big glob. I don't know. I just don't want it to unravel, because it will unravel if you don't secure the ends like that. So then I was just trying to get an idea of how this will form up around. I know that I have too much burlap for what I'm trying to do, but I wasn't quite confident in what shape I needed to create for the burlap. So instead of trying to trim it down while it was flat, I went ahead and bunched it up, and now I'm going to come back in with my scissors, and I'm just going to trim along the edges. Well, I guess I'm not doing it just yet. I'll do it now. I'm going to trim along the edges. I'm just following the same line of the burlap itself, but cutting about 2 inches off around. I mean, whatever burlap you're working with, that's going to dictate, how much you have to trim or whether it's perfect the way that it is. I would say just use your judgment. Do what makes your eyes happy, what looks good to your eye. Just do that, right? It doesn't need to be perfect. Things like this are not meant to be perfect, right? So I've got my burlap all trimmed down, and now I'm going to go ahead and put my little picks into my styrofoam ball, which is obviously completely hidden. I'm just trimming these down so that there isn't too much, because I want them to settle down inside. And if I left them long, they would stick out too far, because they're just way too long, much longer than what the styrofoam ball can accommodate. So I'm just trimming these down and tucking them in. You can use whatever types of greenery or holiday decorations you want. And this is even something that you could do for the summertime, right? I mean, obviously this is Christmas in July, so you could do any time of year. You could do something cute like this with whatever seasonal flowers you have to work with. I just think it's absolutely adorable. And now I'm just kind of fashioning a bow. I'm doing a faux bow at the front here. I'm just using the wire to my advantage and creating loops and kind of tucking it around itself so that it looks like a bow on the front there. But that's really all there is to this. And I think it is super cute, but let me know what you think.
DIY number 11.
Okay, this is kind of like a half of a pine cone. I've got this silver cord here that was just a scrap in my stash that I'm going to use. I just kind of cut it in half, and I'm going to create a loop. But this pine cone, I had used it last year for some other project where I think I was making acorns with it, and I was peeling all of the little, what do you call those? I was going to call it blades, petals, fronds, I don't know, whatever those little things are on the pine cone that make up the pine cone. I'd ripped a whole bunch of them off, and this was what was left. If you have a longer pine cone, that's great. If you have a different shaped pine cone, that's great. But I am going to be making an ornament out of this, and essentially we're just going to decorate the little top of it. So first I am trying to find a way to fasten my hanger on here that makes the most sense to me. So I kind of got it wrapped around what was left of the top of that pine cone, and I'm just going to secure it with some hot glue. But I really worked it into what was there on the pine cone itself. I know it's probably hard to tell on the screen, but hopefully you're gathering what I'm trying to explain. So now I have some different picks. This one is from the Dollar Tree. It's been used in a few other projects, because there's very little left of it. I just keep cutting pieces off of it for various projects. Probably for things like my minis, which will be next week. Minis challenges next week. I am so excited for that. So I hope you'll join me then as well. But just adding a little bit of these frosted berries, and then I'm going to be coming in with some evergreen in just a moment, and just putting in various different little elements to decorate the little top of the pine cone here. So I cut off a piece of the evergreen. I just bent it in half, put down some hot glue, and I'm tucking in the V part of the evergreen. And I'll just do the same thing on the other side. And this is the kind of thing that I will just continue to layer until it looks like I have enough. I don't like to overdo it, but I want to make sure that the top of this is covered and that nothing that doesn't look quite right is showing. Like the little ends of the picks or the ends of the little berry stems, that kind of thing. I like everything to be hidden, everything to be covered up, everything to just look pretty, right? And so I will continue to mess with it until I get it to that point. So this is like some little miniature pine cones. It's like a little mini pick. And I picked up this package of them from the Hobby Lobby a while back when everything was on sale, and just getting that situated there. And so now I'm looking at the back of this and I'm like, oh, you know, I can see some of that stem, so to speak. So I'm adding in some more of the little greenery. This is a piece that I had just trimmed off, and I'm going to trim off another little piece to tuck in there as well, so that the whole thing looks uniform and professional. Really, I want it all to look really pretty and finished. So now I have this Dollar Tree ribbon. It's kind of like a rickrack, but it's like a red. I don't want to say sparkly. It's not sparkly, shiny, maybe. I don't know. It's super pretty. I love it. So every time I find it at the Dollar Tree, I pick it up. But I had started trying to create a bow with it, and then I decided it was going to be easier to get the look that I wanted by doing it piece by piece. So I had put down some hot glue. I made a loop. I just set down some more hot glue. I'm going to make another loop going underneath there, but I decided I needed to trim that off. So I'll add in some more hot glue once I just kind of figure out how I'm doing this here. So you can see I'm going to dab in a little more hot glue. I've got that tucked in, and then I'm going to create another loop. So you can see the start of my bow there on the left on the top of the pine cone. So I'm going to create another loop to put right in the middle. And once I have the loop on there, and I'm sorry that I'm kind of out of frame, but I created my loop, and then I'm just going to push down the middle of the loop. You'll see my loop is there. I'm adding some more hot glue there, and I'm just sticking the middle of the loop down in to create, again, a faux bow. Hopefully that makes sense. And I apologize that I ended up off screen, but now I'm going to create one more little circle, and that'll be the center of my bow and the final loop. So again, just making sure that I've got it the right size, and I'll add a little bit of hot glue to the middle there and create my loop. I wish I weren't off frame like that. I'm going to have to change my camera angle again because I am getting frustrated with myself. So I apologize for that. But once I got that last loop in, that was it. Such a sweet little ornament. I love it. I hope you do too, but let me know what you think.
DIY number 12.
All right. So a couple of weeks ago, had created this little tree, and I wasn't really 100% satisfied with how I had done it. So I had a different idea of how to do it. And the second one I did with Mod Podge, it turned out much better, but it was a hot mess in the process. And I promised that I would have another option, and you all indicated interest. So here we go for take 3 on this. Maybe the third time will be the charm. I actually did find this to be much easier, but I have my same template that I had used before. If you want to see how I created the pattern, you can check out the video from a couple weeks ago. I'll leave a link in my description box for you. But this is just regular cardstock. It's an 8.5 by 11 sheet of cardstock. And I've got a pencil here that I'm tying a string to because I wanted to have a really good curve for the base here rather than just using that template. So hopefully you saw how I did that. But I went ahead and cut it out, and now I am ready to apply my Dollar Tree scarf to the cardstock. So instead of trying to Mod Podge it, this time we are just going to use hot glue, and I'm just going to use it along the inside edges. Oh, I snipped off the point of the little thing of cardstock too, so that it has room for creating the dome shape or the cone shape. But I already lost my train of thought. But I'm using just hot glue along the inside edge, and that's going to be it. This was so much more simplified than what I had done before. Yeah, this is, of the 3 methods, this is the one that I recommend. Now, can you do it the other ways? Absolutely. I think that this turned out probably the nicest of the 3, although I really do like the Mod Podge one. I have to admit, I like the Mod Podge one and how that turned out. But this one with the hot glue, it was not nearly as messy as what I had done with the Mod Podge. So I just am going to trim off some of this excess here and just make sure that I wrap everything nice and securely. I don't want it so tight that it starts warping the cardstock, but I do want it nice and smooth and flat so that I don't have wrinkles. I probably should have ironed this before I did it, but I didn't take the time to do that. So up to you whether you do that or not. I guess I figured that with stretching it like this, it was going to stretch out the wrinkles, and it did for the most part. It definitely got them to relax. So it didn't bother me in the end, is I guess what I'm trying to say, because as we curve it here, and here I'm just really working the top of the cardstock and just trying not to create creases, but really trying to massage it and get it to curve so that I can create my cone shape. But as you pull this around into the cone, it also does stretch the fabric a slight bit more, not a ton, but a slight bit more. Once I had it lined up, I did opt to start at the bottom with the hot glue. So again, just along the seam, some hot glue to get this all pulled together. And I'm trying to be very careful not to have too much of it because I don't want it oozing out. So I'm being very sparing with the amount of hot glue that I'm using in there. And that's really it for the Christmas tree part. And now I am setting it down. I've got a wooden bead there and a dowel. It's not actually a dowel, it's the end of a skewer that I had left over in my stash, one of those really long skewers from the Dollar Tree. And I was trying to shove this parchment paper in there to support the dowel a little bit more because it wasn't quite long enough, and I didn't want to go cutting another skewer. I didn't want to cut another one down. I wanted to use what I had. The parchment paper wasn't working, so I went and grabbed some of these little pom-poms from my stash. I grabbed a few of them thinking I'd need more than one, but one actually ended up being sufficient. So now from my little stash of bits and pieces and odds and ends, I have this tiny little circle that I am going to use to support my wooden bead for my base. And I'm going to let all this hot glue kind of drop down into the base of the hole here so that it glues it to the base, that circle. And then I'm also going to have that, I filled it pretty much. And now I'm just going to insert my skewer and let the hot glue serve to anchor that in there. And I'm just making sure that it's nice and straight. Once it was cool, I used my crimson chalk paint to give that a good coat of paint. I didn't worry about the part I was holding because it's going to be up inside of our little tree and it will not be seen. that just makes things that much easier, right? And now I am grabbing a bunch of little picks, and I have some more of those little miniature pine cones with the pip berries, and I'm just tucking them in the natural hole that was left at the top from creating the cone. And then I have this other little bow that was in my stash. I had pulled it off of some sort of little package. I don't know what it was from, but it just had a wire in it that had attached it to the package, and I just pulled the wire out. So I'm just going to be using the bow once I have all my little pick pieces in, and I will be all set with that. And the bow is just the little finishing touch. I'm just going to use a little bit of hot glue there and attach it, and then I'll be ready to put my tree on its little base, and then that'll be the end of the project. So I've got my base there, it's all dry, I'm sticking it in. I did put some hot glue in there, and then I just held it until it was cool and stable. And that is it. Let me know what you think of this one.
DIY number 13.
Okay, I have a bunch of these little wooden house shapes. They've been in my stash for a while. My sweet subscriber Rose had sent them to me. And then those other little pieces of wood came in a little package from the Dollar Tree. They were all different shapes and sizes of little, I think they're called balsa wood, but I'm not positive. But I grabbed out a selection of those that I am going to use to help put my little houses together. Now, I think these were actually for a garland, because if you notice, they have little holes. There are 2 holes in each house, kind of towards the upper part of each of the houses. So we're going to work on hiding those later. But for right now, I am going to build my houses. So I'm just using hot glue. You can certainly use wood glue if you prefer. I was thinking about doing that, and then I just opted to go with the hot glue. So I am applying, that's the word I wanted, a bead of glue along each wall, and then setting the sides of what will be the sides of the house on the upright. I'm just trying to make sure it's as square as I can get it, because I want my house to all be even and rectangular, as opposed to, what is that called when it's kind of slanted? I know it's all a parallelogram, but anyway. Oh my goodness. Thinking back to my geometry days. Oh my goodness, I'm really having some challenges with my thoughts here. But going ahead and applying that extra side of the house, and I'm going to set it down here and make sure that I'm pressing it down onto the table to ensure that all of the pieces are going to lay flat. I don't want my little house to be wobbly later, so while the hot glue was still warm and pliable, I was just making sure that I was pressing it down and getting it even. So for this one, I'm using some slightly smaller pieces, and I'm going to use 2 of them. Whereas on that last house, I had it standing upright. So now I'm having it sideways and using 2 of them. I don't know if I'm making any sense. You know, they say a picture speaks 1,000 words. Hopefully that's the case here, because I feel like I'm saying nonsense. But I did the same thing with that third little house. And then I'm going to be ready to start making some roofs for our little homes. These turned out so cute, you guys. I am really happy with them. So I can't wait for you to see what I ended up doing. But these are some other pieces that were in that stash. They were kind of strangely shaped, almost more like flat toothpicks. So at any rate, I'm going to kind of double them up here. I'm trimming it down. So this one and that one, they have kind of like a flat area at the peak of the roof. And the one in the middle there, it was pointy at the top. So
I don't know, I felt like I needed to apply a little bit more like a beam across the top, so to speak, for some structural support, if you will, for the roof. And it worked out very well. So trimming these down to be the same size because the widths are the same, or the depths? Anyway, they needed to be the same length. So applying a little bit of hot glue to each of those little tips of the house fronts, and applying the little wood pieces for my beam, my upper beam across the top of my house. So I did that for both of those, and now I'm going to be ready to start applying the actual roof structure. So I'm going to use those same pieces of wood. They were a little bit big for that one, but they worked out perfectly for this one and for the other one. I'm going to be using two. Sorry, my hand's kind of in the way there, but you'll see what I'm doing. Applying a little bit of glue, just the bottom half there to apply that first one. Make sure I've got it situated where I want it. That's the good thing about the hot glue. You can slide it around a little bit for a minute until it starts to cool. But here you can see I am applying the glue only where it's going to be hitting, and it was good that I had that additional little structure there. I overlapped those little wood slats a little bit so that it would create kind of like a shingle effect, if you will. And then I'm just going to do the same thing on the other side and trying to make everything as even or symmetrical as possible. So just trying to be mindful of where everything is landing, so that I can do the same thing on this side that I had done on the first side. So then I felt like I didn't like the kind of gap that was at the top. So I'm taking this old popsicle stick that I'd used for paint stirring some time ago, and I trimmed it down, and I'm just kind of curving the end of the side that I had cut to kind of match the curved edge of the side that I did not cut, just trying to make it look somewhat symmetrical again. And I'm going to be applying that right to the top, but just making sure that it's going to fit properly. And I'm going to just fill that little canal, so to speak, with the hot glue, and then drop my piece right over on top of it. So for the next house, the little wood slats were oh my goodness. The wood pieces that I had for the walls were going to be too large for this one. So I guess I could have used the smaller ones, but I opted not to. So I decided, actually, that's not true. I don't know if I could have used the smaller ones. I can't remember, to be quite honest. But for whatever reason, I decided to use popsicle sticks. Maybe I decided that I wanted it to have a different look to it as well, just for some more interest. So anyway, I am trimming down these popsicle sticks. I had measured out how long I needed each of them to be, and then I cut a whole bunch of them to create my roof slats here. It's going to be the same concept, same principle. I'm just going to be using a lot more of them to go up the edges of either side of this roof. Now, I did go up only until there was enough space for one last slat on either side. I left room because for that last one, I just wanted to make sure that I was going to be bringing the two pieces on either side, the one piece on either side, together to a point. I didn't want to end up with some kind of a weird gap, so I went as far as I could without going all the way to the top on both sides. So you can see I've got kind of like just a small gap there, a little bit of space left on either side, and then I'll take my last two pieces and I am going to kind of steeple them. Is that the right word? Steeple? I'm going to bring them together in a point and make sure that they are even, and so that my roof looks even and doesn't look lopsided. So just working with these to see how they're best going to fit, and then I am going to go ahead and apply them with the hot glue. So a little bit of hot glue on either side. I'm putting them both on together to make sure that they stay even. All right, so once I had my roofs all set, oh, here I'm doing the other one. Sorry, I forgot that I hadn't done this one yet, but same as the first one, but I used 3 instead of 2. And with this one, I was able, so this is kind of like a combo of the first and the second ones I showed you, because I'm using these larger slats, but I'm also steepling the roof. And for this one, I just held the one, as you can see, in place while I put the other one on, so I knew exactly where it needed to be positioned. And then I'll do the other one and just get that secured in there. And then my roof structures will be completely built, and I'm going to be ready to paint these. So look at how cute these are already. I love these so much, but give me a big thumbs up if you like what I'm doing here. All right, so now I have my Nantucket blue chalk paint. I have my Adirondack white chalk paint. I'm pulling out mineral, which is off camera, there it is, and my black. And these are the colors I'm going to use. I do pull out my red a little bit later as well, but one house I'm just painting in mineral, as you can see. The next house I am going to do in my Adirondack white. And these just took one good coat of paint. That was all they needed. The third house I'm doing in the Nantucket blue. I just love this color for houses. I don't know why. I don't know, maybe because it speaks New England to me. And then I did black on the one roof. I'm using mineral on this second roof for the white house, and I'll do black on the blue house roof. And so now I'm going to come in, they're all dry at this point. I'm going to come back in and paint the little doors on each house. So this is the mineral again. And it occurred to me as I was editing this video that I probably could have come in on this one with the blue for the doorway. And then on the white house, I could have done the black, but instead I did red. I don't know, I just wanted a pop of red in there. So I think they definitely still came out super cute, but let me know what you think. And now I'm going to decorate them a little bit more. As I mentioned before, I want to be covering up those holes that are in the houses. So I took some of this little evergreen tie, and it's kind of like it's wired, right? So I just created a mini little wreath with a piece of it that I'd snipped off, and now I'm hot gluing it to the top. And then I'm going to come in with some little berries that I'm going to pull off of this other pick. I've just got these little teeny tiny ones off of this little frosted berry pick. And using my little tweezers to place them, I'm just getting a little bit of hot glue. I'm not even squeezing the trigger on my hot glue. I'm just kind of dipping it in the glue that's kind of dripping on the nozzle there to get what I need to apply it to the wreath. Okay, now I've got these little pip berries. I was having a harder time trying to figure out how to decorate the two skinnier houses. I felt like that blue one was super easy with the little wreath that I did on top. These other two took a little bit more effort. So yeah, these I was using thinking that they might look a little bit like Christmas lights. They're kind of on the big side for this little house, but I don't know. I still think it looks cute. So I'm just making sure that I've got them covering up those holes, but then also getting them secured in here. So once I had them in place, I went ahead and used some hot glue to just secure it at the tip and then at the ends. So got that all settled down and just add a little bit more glue on either end so that it wasn't going to end up falling off. This third house was the hardest one for me. I'm not sure that I love what I ended up doing. At first, I started using this red wired garland from the Dollar Tree, and I was trying to, I just wanted it to be festive looking, but I just was not liking the look of this. I had glued just the tip of it there thinking that maybe I could manipulate it to get it to what I wanted. Yeah, no, I didn't like it at all. I thought it looked weird. So I went ahead and pulled that off. Try to get some of that off. I didn't want to take my heat gun to it to try to remove it because I didn't want my roof to fall apart if I got my roof too warm. So I just did my best with that. And then I ended up applying these little, I don't know what these are called. I call them bling. But these little decals, they're self-adhesive. And I was thinking Christmas lights. That was kind of what I had in my head, but the whole thing was a little bit of a weird shape because of the windows that are there. So I don't know. I did my best with that one. Not my favorite out of the three, but I think they're still all super cute. So now I've got fairy lights, and I was untangling it because it had just been in a drawer in my stash. And I'm going to be kind of wrapping a bunch of them together and tucking them up inside the house here. And then it'll be like on a string, I guess, if you will. The houses will be somewhat connected because I'm just going to use this same string of fairy lights to light all three of the houses. Now, I didn't show it on camera, but once I got all of this situated, I did go back with some hot glue at the base of each house and just kind of tack down the lights so that they wouldn't fall out, that they would stay where I wanted them. And I think these turned out super cute, but I can't wait to hear what you think. So be sure to leave me a comment. And if you haven't already subscribed, I hope you'll consider doing that.
DIY number 14.
All right. This is a scarf from the Dollar Tree. It's kind of like a fuzzy faux fur scarf. I'm going to trim off the little pom-pom on the end there. We'll save that for a future project. And I thought I might be able to just take the seam out of the bottom of that. And I ultimately gave up. I do end up just cutting that off. But I'm trying to figure out the best way to use the scarf for what I'm looking to achieve here. So trimmed that off, and now I'm going to be cutting 5 sections of this off. I want them all to be equal sections, and I want them to be sufficiently long for the shape that I'm going to be cutting. So I've got it started here. If I had to guess, I would say these are probably 5 inches long. And I would guess that they're probably about 3 inches wide. So I'm going to call it a 3x5. That's my best guess. I did not measure them, but I've got a piece of parchment paper here, and I am going to use this as a pattern. I tried to hand draw it. Started out okay, and then it kind of went out the window. But yeah, that right there didn't look so bad, and then that just was like, yeah, no. So what I did was I found an image on my phone that I could use, and I manipulated it until I got it to the right size, and I just used this to trace. So I've got a new piece of parchment paper here that I'm going to use, and I've got my pencil, and I'm just going to trace the outline of the stocking to create my pattern. Now, once I had this all set, I do ultimately create additional copies of the pattern. You'll see that in just a second. But right now, I'm just making sure that it's going to fit on the scarf sections that I had cut out. And so once I was satisfied that was going to happen, I'm just tracing it a little bit darker so that I can see the line well enough to cut that out. So just double checking again that it's going to fit on here. I'm noticing that the seam in the scarf is going to need to go because it's going to interfere with what I am trying to do. I was thinking I might be able to work around it, but that was not the case ultimately. So I went ahead and ripped out that seam. I'm sorry about that pause there. I was having a coughing fit. But now I mentioned that I did create other copies of the pattern. So to be exact, I'm going to do 4 more. So I just folded my parchment paper in half a couple of times, and I'm going to trace my pattern onto the parchment paper, cut that out, and then I'll have a total of 5, right? Because the 4 more that I'm cutting right now plus the original. So I'll have 1 for each of my little pieces of scarf. That's just going to help me to go faster in the end. So I'm not going to have to like pin it and unpin it and pin it and unpin it. I'm just going to pin all of them and then I'll be able to just sew all of them. So I'm pinning them down. The scarves are, the seam has been ripped out of each one of them. They are still folded in half, and I've got the right side, they're inside out. Okay, so the right side is in right now. So I got out my sewing machine and I'm sewing around the outer edge of these patterns. I'm not using them like a regular pattern. If you're a regular sewer, if you'll know what I mean, usually you're sewing about a 1/4 inch inside your pattern. The reason is the patterns that I did here, that's the actual size that I want to end up with. So I'm sewing around the outer edge. Here's the other side so you can kind of see the stitching perhaps. Make sure you leave the top part of this open so that it actually functions like a little stocking. And then I took all of my pins out and I'm ready to start trying to figure out how I'm going to finish this. Now, had I to do it over again, if I had it to do over again, I might consider actually sewing the white fuzzy part of the stocking onto my red pieces before I sewed the stocking together. It ended up just fine the way I did it, but I'm going to end up using hot glue for this next part. So I've got it right side out so you can see how they all look. They are super cute. And now I've got my, these are scraps that I'm going to be using. These were microfiber cloth from the Dollar Tree. And this is why I keep all my scraps, because I never know when I might actually be able to use them. And waste not, want not. I always would prefer to reuse things and save the scraps and limit my waste. So that was my thought there. So here I'm just trying to figure out how I want to apply it. I hadn't settled on the hot glue just yet. Originally I thought I was going to be sewing these, but then I realized that my hole was kind of small. A lot of trial and error. I did glue it down. I'm going to show you. I didn't want to show you this one because, again, it was a lot of trial and error and figuring it out. And clearly I have the seam in the front of my stocking, so now I'm going to have to decorate it. And I was originally just planning on having them be plain stockings, but because of my faux pas, now I'm just going to decorate it to hide that seam. And you can certainly do that with all of them if you so choose, and that way you won't have a visible seam anywhere. For the rest of them, I opted to do it the other way, so my seam is just in the back, but you can do it however you would like to do it. So just using some hot glue to get that all secured. And now I've cut out, now that I've figured out what I'm doing, I cut out 4 additional pieces of the microfiber cloth. I'm sticking, so this is where I'm showing you what I actually do. So I'm sticking a piece of parchment paper inside the stocking there so that the hot glue doesn't go through the fabric and glue itself together. And then I am applying a bead of hot glue across the top, securing my little, excuse me, microfiber cloth. I've got the good side facing up in this instance. So the stocking itself is inside out and the microfiber cloth is right side out. And that's because we're going to be folding it over. So it needs to be opposite of what the stocking is. I'm just trimming off some of that extra fabric to get it out of the way. And then I am folding over the little microfiber cloth gluing it down and just making sure that that is nice and secure. I'm not gluing the seam just yet. I will do that later once I have it all situated. I want to give myself a little bit of wiggle room as far as how that's going to play out. So once it was cool enough, I pulled out the parchment paper. I'm going to turn it right side out. And here is our little stocking. I think these are just adorable. So getting it all situated, I'm making sure that the edge of the white microfiber is staying inside the stocking and just making sure that it's where it needs to be. And then I can glue that little seam down. So there is that. And that's what I did with the rest of them. Just made sure that they were nice and right side out. Here they all are all done, and I'm going to go ahead and continue to decorate all of them because of that first one that I kind of messed up. Now, is it really messed up? You know, I guess I could have flipped it around and had the toe pointing the other way. I just, in my head, I decided that I wanted the toes all pointing to the right side, so that's the way that I did it. Excuse me. So decorating them with just little the evergreen ties, and then little berry picks that I just cut little pieces off of. And you can decorate these however you'd like, or you can leave them plain. You don't have to decorate them. So here they all are. Here they are all decorated. I would love to know what you think of these. I'm actually going to create little hangers for them now, though. So this is some red cord. This is something I had picked up at the Hobby Lobby when all of their Christmas stuff was 60% off. And I'm just cutting pieces. I would say these are probably maybe 3 or 4 inches in length. And I'm just going to be creating loops that I can glue into the inside. I'm going to call it the back of the stocking. I think that would be considered the back because it would be at the back of your leg if you were wearing it. So just positioning it like that so you can see how I'm doing it. So I've got my loop, I've got my ends. I'm going to apply some hot glue there, and then I'm going to tuck it down inside the stocking, trying to not get the glue everywhere, and just kind of squeezing it until it is good to hold on its own. I did that with the rest of them, and that was it. Let me know what you think.
DIY number 15.
Okay, this is leftover from a project I did, I think it was last week. I can't remember if it was last week or the week before. I made this Christmas countdown. It was adorable. If you haven't seen it, check it out. But I wanted to use this for a new project. And I had this idea I could put these skewers in here and it would hold it right up. And then I'm looking at it. I'm like, well, wait a minute. My star is upside down. And I'm thinking that's probably not good. I went to check Google to be sure, and I'm looking it up, and I was like, yeah, not good to have my upside down star. So I'm going to plan B on this. Just using the skewers in the opposite way. I needed to trim these ones down. I'd gone back to my stash for some taller ones or longer ones, and I'm just trying to figure out how to position them so that this will work properly. I'm using some hot glue now in the front hole. It's gonna get a little wonky here, but I don't know if I didn't try to see if just little rods would have worked better. I had the skewers, so that was what I was going with. I'm not sure if little rods would have worked because I think they might have been too wide, too thick to get through those holes, at least the ones that I have. So securing that with hot glue front and back, and now I wanted a little bit extra support, so I'm using a popsicle stick I do end up changing this a little bit later, but for right now, I'm just applying a little dab of glue to either end of the popsicle stick. And I'm going to put the ends of those skewers right down in there so that it just is providing it with some extra stability to be able to stand on its own. And now I'm going to decorate it. I decided I was going to do like a little garland across the top of this. So I've got, this is from the Dollar Tree. This is, again, a tie, but you can see it's kind of fluffier. And I thought that this would work out well for this particular garland that I was going to do. Now, I didn't realize at the time that my SD card for my camera was almost out of space again. So in a moment, my camera shut off and I didn't realize it right away. I think I've resolved the problem. There was a bunch of stuff on that card that I didn't realize was on there in like a hidden folder. I've now found it and deleted it, so I shouldn't have that issue anymore. But leave it to me, right? So a little bit of hot glue on either corner once I got this in the shape that I wanted it. That's secure. And then I lost the power on my camera or whatever, but now I'm showing you. I used some of these little picks that I literally pulled them apart. I had a couple of these little bows from the Dollar Tree that I applied, and that was how I decorated my little garland. But again, you can decorate it however you would like. I mentioned before that I was going to change the stand on this. This is just my heat gun. I am loosening up the hot glue on here so that I can adjust how this is going. I decided I wanted I wanted to say toothpick. That is not a toothpick. That is a popsicle stick. Jeez, you guys, yeah. Anyway, you can see how I am trying to do this. I've got the little support at the back, but then I'm bringing it forward. I think this is ultimately the best way to do this. And it's also going to allow me to put it on my tiered tray with less hindrance, because the bar across the back was going to prevent me from actually putting it on my tray with the upright post going through the middle of the tray, if you know what I mean. So once I got that all secured, I decided I was also going to cover the back of this so the star would be gold. These are little Christmas ornaments in this like foil. It came with like tissue paper, but it's foil. But like plastic foil. I don't know. I cut a piece out that I can apply to the back. Just kind of smudged a bit of hot glue along there because I didn't want it to be too hot. So I didn't want too much glue applied because I was afraid I was going to melt this because it is plastic. And did the same thing. So I literally put the nozzle right on the piece and kind of dragged it along the piece just to get a tiny little bit of hot glue. And there you go.
DIY number 16.
All right, this is a little box, I believe from Michael's, that my sister had picked up for me a while back. It was $1 and then it was on sale 20% off, I think. So I've got a bunch of, I think they're called finishing nails. They're tiny nails with tiny little heads on them. They do have heads, but they're small heads. And I'm just banging a whole bunch of these into my little wooden bin, box, whatever you want to call this, until I've got the shape that I want. And then I am going to put my nails away and grab my baker's twine in yellow and white. I'm creating a slip knot here. Now, in hindsight, I should have left a tail, like a decently long tail on here. Of course, I snipped it off thinking I wanted to hide it, but had I left the tail on it, it would have made it easier for me to tie off with the other end when I was finished wrapping this. So I'm right now just going to wrap it in the shape of the star that I'm looking to create. So just like you would draw a star, that's the pattern that I'm following with this. And I'm just kind of twisting it around each nail as I go through to help make it secure. I think I found later that I didn't necessarily have to do that, but that was what I was doing in the beginning. So if you try this project, you can see if you can do it without twisting it around each nail head, and let me know if that works out well for you, because I think you can probably do it that way. But here I am just trying to tie that off and making sure that it's secure so it won't come unraveled. I just kind of had to manipulate it a little bit, and then I'm going to trim it here and tie it off some more. I'm sorry that it's hard to see. I'm kind of weaving it through the design that I've made, kind of, and then pulling it taut. And I did that a couple of times just to make sure that it was kind of tied off. Then I trimmed it off and tucked it down inside the string so that you couldn't see the end. And now this is green twine from the Dollar Tree that I had picked up a while ago. I've had it in my stash probably for a couple of years, to be honest. And I'm going to do the same thing with this, but now I'm a little bit wiser, having tried to figure out how to tie off that star. So I'm going to leave a long tail on this one. It's still a slip knot, attaching it to that first nail. And now I'm going to work my way around to do my little tree here. And I'm going to go back and forth kind of at a diagonal. So I'm skipping some of the nails here and there and then going back to them. Because I want to make sure that it's a little bit more dynamic than just going back and forth. You certainly can just go back and forth if that's a look that you like, but I really wanted mine to be kind of crisscrossing all over my little tree. So I'm going to work my way all the way up, and then I'll work my way back down again. So if I've got any holes or gaps, those will ultimately get covered on the way back through. But you can see I'm kind of going over it back and forth a little bit anyway, instead of going straight up. So just continuing, and here you see me doing it without twisting it around the nail heads in some places, and it actually worked just fine. So I do think that that might possibly be a way to do it. Worked my way all the way back down to the bottom, and then I was ready to go ahead and tie it off. So you can see my little tail sticking out down there. I left a long tail when I trimmed it off there, and I'm just going to tie it right near the base of the nail that I started with. So tying that in a good knot there, and then I'm going to tuck these strings right up in and under. But I realized the one of them was a little bit too long, so trimmed that off, tucked them in. Now they're hidden. I think this is super cute. And it's pretty much done, except I'm just making sure my nails are all like the same height there. But as you saw, I've got all those nails sticking out in the back. So if you followed me for any length of time, you know I like to have things looking finished, or at least not, you know, a danger or a hazard to somebody who goes to pick something up. So I've got some more of my microfiber cloth that I'm tucking in here, and that's it.
DIY number 17.
For this project, I have a wreath form in the shape of a candy cane from the Dollar Tree, a whole bunch of chenille stems in red and white, and then I have the deco mesh also from the Dollar Tree. I'm just showing you that those were exactly the same, even though they have completely different seasonal labels on them. All the deco mesh from the Dollar Tree, I think, to my knowledge, appears to be the same. So if you pick it up during different seasons, you can still use it together. But I'm going to start out by adding chenille stems to all of the joints on this wreath form. I had started out just doing 2 at each section, and then as I worked through it, I decided it really needed to have more, and I'm going to show you why in just a second. But I'm alternating the red and the white chenille stems throughout the form because, you know, candy cane. I'm going to alternate the mesh as well. But here I'm taking some of the mesh just to kind of see how how much it's going to cover the form. And that was where I decided that I needed to kind of supplement here to create additional bumps to just give more coverage for the form. And then as I was going through it, I realized around that curve, there's a lot of territory to kind of cover. So I opted to add in some additional chenille stems at kind of like the midway point. And then I'm going to be using some hot glue to keep those in place because they don't have the crossbar to use to kind of anchor them. So I'll show you that in just, oh, here it is. So I just added a little drop of hot glue there and then slid the chenille stem down over the hot glue. So just adding hot glue at like the midway point and then making sure that the chenille stem is anchored. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. I think this time I kind of added the hot glue and then twisted the chenille stem around it, but either way works. So now I am ready to start adding in my mesh. I'm going to start with that end, and I'm just tucking the end towards the inside so that it won't be visible. It won't like stick out funny. Just using the twist ties to anchor that down. And then I'm going to be creating just little bubbles of mesh. And I'll anchor the mesh at every single chenille stem along here, using the red for the red, and then I'll be using the white for the white. Now, you could trim this off once you got to the end, but I am opting not to do that because I do have the section in between the red and the white that needs to be camouflaged again. So I'm going to opt to bring this kind of across on a diagonal from where I ended with the red chenille stems, and I'm going to bring it up to that white stem on the opposite side. And it's just going to help to camouflage my frame, create a little bit more fullness. And now I'm going to do the same thing going diagonal across up to the red, and I'm going to work my way back across with little bubbles. And I'm going to do this all the way up the wreath frame, all the way around until I have all of the red set. And then you'll see that I'm going to work my way back down with the white. Now, this is only one way of doing this. There are a lot of different things you can do with the deco mesh. Sometimes I'll cut it into 12-inch sections and let it roll up on itself, bend those in half and secure them kind of at that fold with the chenille stems. I think you would probably need a lot more mesh to do that, and I would probably put a lot more chenille stems in there also in different sections. So similar to how I created another joint at the curvature up at the top, I would probably do that throughout the wreath form if I were to do it that way. I could be mistaken. Maybe it would take up a little bit more room and be a little bit more filling. So I don't know. I would have to try it and kind of see how it was working for me if I were to do it that way. So that's another option that you can certainly try. And that would probably make a pretty full, like, when I say full, I mean the mesh would probably stand out relatively far from the wreath form, probably a little bit more than what I'm doing here, but not terribly far. It might be similar. But now I've got the white, so I am doing the same thing that I did with the red, but I'm working my way back down. This first step, I was really trying to figure out the best way to work it back down without covering up the red and having a bunch of X's go, red and white X's going through here. So I eventually did opt not to cut across, and instead I cut straight down. So you're going to see I've got my bumps going from left to right there, and now I'm just working my way straight down and doing it that way. I'm letting that red be that filler in between the two rows, and just bringing that down along the side rather than doing the crossing for that first instance. And then I do bring it across
once I'm down, because I feel like that's got to be part of the white stripe. I don't know if I'm making sense at all, you guys, but hopefully you can tell from what I'm doing here. For me, a lot of it is trial and error and seeing what looks good to my eye. So I encourage you to try different things and see what works best for you, what you think looks the best. So once I got that all done, I am going to pull out some ribbon. These are my Kirkland ribbons. This one is kind of a white blingy, I'm going to call it blingy ribbon. It's got really thick, like chunky glitter on it. So it's not that fine stuff that falls off everywhere. This stays put pretty well. And I am just using a piece of cardboard that I keep in my stash. It's got a 6-inch height, so to speak. So I'm creating 12-inch ribbons because, you know, the front and the back, 6 inches. So in the loop, they're 12. Dovetailing the ends. Now, when I started to go to use this, I did find that they were a little bit too long. So I ended up wishing that I'd used my 8-inch little cardboard that I have to create 16-inch ribbons, because I did end up cutting them in half. So now I'm working with 5-inch ribbons instead of, 6-inch ribbons instead of, I could have been working with 8-inch ribbons. When you dovetail it, it does become a little bit shorter, so these probably are closer to 5-inch. But I felt like they were working out better than it would have been if I had had them twice as long, because they would have just been sticking way far out from this wreath form. So if I had to do it again, I would use my 8-inch cardboard, which would have created 8-inch ribbon lengths, because I would have cut it at the top and the bottom on my loops, right? Hopefully I'm making sense again. And I would have done it with the 8-inch ribbons. But this worked out just fine. So you can see I'm just tucking it in. I basically pinch the ribbon in the middle and I tuck that into the chenille stem, and then I twist the stem around to secure it. I'm doing the white on white, and then I've got this red ribbon that I'm going to be using on the red areas. And this is going to be creating a little bit more texture, a little bit more coverage. It's just going to help to make the wreath look a little bit more full and finished. Once I have all the ribbon in, I'm going to twist up all of these little twist ties. So I kind of just twist them together, and then I'm using a paintbrush to twist it around. You could use a pencil, you could use a pen, you could use your finger, whatever works for you. But this just, for me, helped it move a little bit faster, just twirling it down and kind of tucking it in between the mesh. And that's it. Let me know what you think.
DIY number 18.
Okay, for this project, I have this Santa wooden cutout. It was something that my sister had picked up for me from Michael's a couple of years ago, actually. She'd gotten it on sale. It was originally 99 cents. It was 20% off. So really great deal. I am using my Adirondack white chalk paint to paint the base. And then my plan was every other letter. And then I started coming in with my red to paint the other letters. And that all started out real well. It was all well and good until I got on the phone and was talking with Rich while I was doing this. And then I started painting the letters that I had painted white. I don't know what I was thinking. Well, clearly I wasn't thinking, because I wasn't focused on what I was doing. And it took me a while to even realize what I was doing. And like right here is where I realize, you silly, you painted one that you weren't supposed to paint. So I was like, you know what, let's just move on and let it dry, and then I'll go back over it with white. I was going to have to touch up some areas that I had accidentally hit on the base there anyway. So once I had finished with my red, I did come in and touch it up, and then I painted back over that T. And that took probably 3, maybe 4 coats of paint, to be honest. So once I got that all painted white, I was ready for the next step. But yeah, next time I just need to pay a little bit more attention in the first place. So now I am taking a remnant of a Dollar Tree scarf that I had. The rest of this was used for little mini stockings from last week's video for the mini challenge. So if you haven't seen that yet, encourage you to go and check that out. But I've just got this little section that I am trying to figure out how large to make it. So I just cut down the section that I needed, trying to get those extra fuzzies out of the way. And now I'm going to kind of draw a triangle shape here, leaving the bottom open, because essentially I'm creating the shape of a hat, or attempting to do so. So once I had that cool, I trimmed off some of the extra fabric that was around the hot glue. You could also sew that, it doesn't have to be hot glued. And then I'm going to turn it right side out. And once I have that all turned the way that it needs to be, I'm going to use actually a little paintbrush to help kind of stick the pointy part of it out, try and get this in the shape that it needs to be in. And then I went to my stash and I grabbed a scrap of my microfiber cloth from the Dollar Tree. It was like a microfiber rag, cleaning rag. And just trimming off a little piece that I can use for the base of my hat, making sure that I've got it the right length and that it's not fraying on the end there. And I'll just use some hot glue to tack this down once I figure out exactly where it needs to go. So, does not need a lot. You also want to make sure you don't end up gluing your hat opening together. So I'm just being careful of that, making sure that I'm not burning myself in the process, and getting this all glued down. Once I have that all set, yeah, you can see I'm just making sure that the hat's not getting glued together. Using a little bit more hot glue to finish that up and make sure that it's all set. And then you can see those little pom-poms that I have on my table. I'm going to be grabbing one of those to make the little pom-pom at the tip of the hat. I didn't show it, but I literally just sat the hat on the end, so it's kind of sticking up there. I'm going to add a little bit of hot glue just to keep it from falling off or shifting, keep it in place. But that's going to finish this one up, and let me know what you think of this one. I think it's super cute.
DIY number 19.
All right, I have these little gift bags from the Dollar Tree, and then a little wooden box, wooden tray, that was also from, I think that was from, I can't remember if it was Michael's or if it was the Dollar Tree, forgive me. I think it might have been Michael's, but I believe those were all like $1 as well. I'm using my Adirondack Adirondack, oh my goodness, it's not Adirondack. My Antique Wax by Waverly. That is what I was trying to say. I use my Antique White all the time, and I guess it's just stuck in my head. But this is the Antique Wax by Waverly. I got that all coated with a baby wipe, and now I am going to cut the edges off of my little sack. I am after that Merry and Bright piece. I will not be using the back section, so I will just save that for another time. These are super cute because they're made out of like a fine burlap, and fine, by fine I mean it's like tightly knit or woven, but I'm just going to fray the edges here. I'm going to do this on all 4 sides, just grabbing the strings to create just a frayed edge, just until it's about looking the way that I want it. I didn't have a huge edge on it, only because I didn't want to cut into the letters, the print. So then I was just kind of tidying up the edges a little bit because they were kind of not even. Just lining this up on here. It's going to be a little shelf sitter. I started with my Mod Podge. This is just the matte Mod Podge, and I was going to paint the back of it and then put it down, but I realized that because it is burlap, it was going right through the burlap onto the piece, so I opted to do what I'm doing now and just applying some of the Mod Podge and then putting the piece down. And now I'm just going to go over the entire surface of the Merry and Bright. I'm going to call it a sign for lack of a better term, but I'm not going over the frayed edges. I'm going right up along where the fabric piece ends, if you will, where it's still whole. And then all I have to do is dry it, and that's it. You could certainly decorate this more. I opted to go minimal.
DIY number 20.
Okay, I've got some more of these little gift bags from the Dollar Tree. This time they have these little Christmas trees on them, and I'm going to cut out the Christmas tree shape. I'm leaving an edge of about, I'd say maybe a half an inch going around it. My plan is to stuff this. I wasn't thinking very clearly in the way that I conducted it at first, but I did salvage it and ended up decorating it a little bit extra in the process. So I've got it cut out here, and you're going to see what I end up doing. I'm flipping it the inside out, and then I'm going to use my hot glue here. So I've got my parchment paper down so that I don't glue it to my table. And I am just going to run a bead of glue all the way around the outer edge. The bottom of it is still together. I didn't cut that piece. I was moving a little bit slower than I should have there, so some of my hot glue did end up cooling faster than I could get my fabric down, but you'll see I show a fix for that in just a minute. But that's where I realized, you silly, you didn't leave an opening to stuff this. So I am trying to salvage that at this point, and the little trunk is just, yeah, it is not wide enough an opening for me to be able to stuff this or even flip it right side out, which is necessary before I stuff it. So I'm essentially cutting the bottom part out. So it's a good thing that I left, that seam allowance essentially around, because now I'm able to cut this out, get the hot glue out of the way without damaging the design. And you see that the side of it there is still open. I considered opening that up more and stuffing it from that side, but I had already cut the bottom, so I decided it was better just to keep going the way I was, and I was going to fix the top the side. And so I do that by reheating the hot glue with my heat gun. So I heated that up, melted the hot glue, and then I was able to press it back together again. Problem solved. And once it was cool, I was able to go ahead and flip it right side out now because the entire bottom is open. I'm going to be using a little paintbrush again, the opposite end of the brush, to stick in there and get my piece fully turned right side out. And so once I had that all set, I was ready to start stuffing it. So I just used some fiber fill and I stuffed it until it was the way it needed to be. I'm using my paintbrush again to kind of tuck it into that point, making sure that everything is filled, and then coming back with my hot glue. Now, because with the hot glue and this particular fabric, it was going to be too hard to turn the fabric in to create a piece that didn't look like it had a seam like this, so now I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to camouflage this somehow. So I went to my stash And I got these cute little miniature presents that I think are also from the Dollar Tree. And I'm just gonna glue a couple of these under my tree. So I got the first one down, and then I decided I needed to trim up the base of the trunk a little bit more so that it's not gonna show from beneath my little gifts. And then I applied the second little present here. So I've got my little gifts under the tree. And then I also went back to my stash and I got these little star ornaments you've seen me use on other projects. In this instance, I am creating an ornament. So this is just gonna be the top of my ornament, and it has a little hanger built in. So it's perfect for my needs. I'm just gonna glue that to the top. And then I'm gonna grab some cord. That's the word I was looking for. This is from the Dollar Tree. I've had it in my stash for a little while, and I am going to create a hanger with this. So it's gold and it's got kind of the same look as that star. So I created a loop that was probably a good 8 inches, maybe 10 inches long, and I've folded it in half, tied the bottom. And it's too thick for me to run or force through on my own, just threading it through the little loop at the top of that star. So instead I've got a thread from that piece that I trimmed off the cord because it was kind of unraveling. So I'm using that. I looped it through my loop and then threaded that through the top of the star. And I'm using it to pull my cord through that loop, kind of like a needle threader. So, and there you have it. I think this is super cute, but I would love to know what you think. Cute little tree ornament.
Okay, everybody, that's it for today. If you enjoyed the projects, remember to give me a big thumbs up, leave me a comment, let me know which one was your absolute favorite. And until the next time, be well, be kind, and make it a great day. Thanks again for watching. Take good care. Bye.